Have you ever been guilt-tripped into eating something you just didn't like just to keep the peace? So, here's what happened to someone I know. Her Indian mother-in-law kept pushing her home-cooked meals, even when she politely declined. Seems harmless, right? But what if it goes deeper than food? Let's unpack this story, and you tell me who's in the wrong. You ever met someone who thinks their cooking is so good it's basically a gift to the world? Like turning down a second helping is a personal insult. Well, that's exactly the kind of mother-in-law we're talking about today. This story starts with a young woman. Let's call her May. She's Chinese-American, married into a traditional Indian family. Now, May's mother-in-law is one of those ladies who takes a lot of pride in her cooking. And hey, nothing wrong with that. Generations of family recipes, love in every dish, the whole 9 yards. But here's where it gets tricky. Her MIL doesn't just love cooking, she expects everyone else to love it too, like, without question. So picture this. Every family visit turns into a mini food festival. The table is packed, spicy curries, fragrant rice, fried snacks, you name it. And the mother-in-law? She's watching like a hawk. May, trying to be polite, usually takes small portions of what she can handle. Indian food's got strong spices, and for someone not raised with it, that can be a lot. Sometimes she'll say she's full. Other times she'll nibble a little and leave the rest. But no matter what she does, it's never enough. Cue the guilt trip. You don't like my cooking? Everyone else loves it. Why don't you? This is my special recipe. I made it just for you. Now imagine hearing that over and over again. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. And frankly, it's exhausting. May's not trying to be rude. She's just being honest. But her mother-in-law turns it into a personal attack. And here's the kicker. On the very first day they met, her MIL had no problem saying she didn't like Chinese food. Just flat out, I don't eat that. No hesitation. No sugarcoating. Now think about that for a second. May's supposed to smile through every plate, every spice, every bite, out of respect. But her culture, her food, not even a second thought. That's the kind of double standard that wears people down. And I get it. Food is emotional. It's tied to memory, love, identity. But respect, that's got to go both ways. You can't demand someone to love your traditions while dismissing theirs. And here's something worth asking. When does cultural pride turn into cultural pressure? I mean, where's the line between sharing your heritage and forcing it onto someone else? And how many of us have been there, biting our tongue, literally and figuratively, just to avoid a family fight over food? So let me ask you this. If you were May, would you keep trying to please her? Or would you finally push back? Let me know what you think. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, and a little ironic. So after dealing with months, maybe even years, of being guilt-tripped for not scarfing down every last spoonful of her mother-in-law's spicy Indian dishes, May starts noticing something that stings a little deeper. This woman, who insists her daughter-in-law should love Indian food no matter what, has made zero effort, zero, to meet May halfway. Remember how I mentioned that first meeting? The one where her mother-in-law said she doesn't like Chinese food? It wasn't a joke or a casual comment. It was blunt, straight-faced, and final. I don't eat Chinese food. That's it, and that's where the double standard really hits. Because let's be honest, Chinese cuisine is massive. It's not just one flavor profile or one dish. From dim sum to hot pot to delicate stir-fried vegetables, there's an incredible range. But none of that mattered. It was all brushed off, not even a pretend effort to try it. And yet May is expected to keep smiling and chewing through dishes her body can barely handle, all in the name of respect. It's frustrating, right? It's like being told, respect my culture, but yours doesn't count. Now, some people might say, well, she's older, she's set in her ways. You should just let it go. And I get that. Generational gaps are real. Cultural pride can run deep, especially in immigrant families where food is one of the last ways people feel connected to home. But here's the thing. Mutual respect isn't a one-way street. If we're going to expect the younger generation to bend over backwards for tradition, shouldn't there be room for a little curiosity in return? So, one day, May decides to try something new. She stops showing up empty-handed. Instead, she starts bringing her own homemade Chinese dishes, not to prove a point, at least not at first, but to share something from her side. Dishes she grew up eating, flavors that remind her of family, meals that carry just as much heart as her mother-in-law's cooking. And how does the meal respond? Suddenly, she's not hungry. She'll eat it later. Every time. No interest, no compliments, not even a polite bite. Sound familiar? So May flips the script. The next time her dish gets ignored, she says, sweetly, with a sad face, "Oh, you don't like my cooking?" And then just waits. That's when the excuses start rolling in. "Oh no, I'm just full. I had a late lunch. I don't usually eat this kind of food at night." And May? She doesn't argue. She just nods, the way her meal used to. Now here's my question for you. Is May being petty, or just holding up a mirror? When someone uses guilt as a weapon, is it fair to give them a taste of their own medicine? Or does that just make you the same as them? I'd love to hear where you're spending we on this. Let me ask you this. At what point does keeping the peace start to feel like losing yourself? Because that's exactly where May started to find herself after all this back and forth with her mother-in-law. On the surface, it was about food, but underneath, it was something a lot more complex. A silent tug-of-war over identity, space, and respect. And the more she gave in, the more invisible she started to feel. Think about it. Every polite smile, every forced bite, every time she bit her tongue instead of speaking up, those little moments started to add up. At first, she told herself it was about being the bigger person. She didn't want to be labeled difficult. She didn't want to cause tension in the family. But over time, something started to shift. Because when someone keeps dismissing your boundaries, no matter how small, they're also dismissing you. And here's the thing that really got to May. Her mother-in-law wasn't just ignoring her preferences. She was using guilt as a tool, making May feel like the bad guy every time she didn't perform the way a daughter-in-law was supposed to. And that guilt, it's powerful, especially when it's wrapped in family expectations and cultural pressure. So when May started turning the tables, it wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about taking up space, finally. It was about saying, hey, my culture matters too, my comfort matters too. And that's not petty. That's survival. Of course, some people might say she should have just let it go. Stayed gracious, kept the peace. But here's where it gets complicated. Peace that comes at the cost of your voice isn't really peace at all. It's silence. And silence, especially in relationships that are supposed to feel safe, can eat away at you over time. What May did, mirroring the same behavior back, wasn't about revenge. It was about reflection. She needed her mother-in-law to feel what she had been feeling all along. The awkwardness, the rejection, the quiet disrespect. Only then could there be a chance for mutual understanding, or at least a pause in the one-sidedness. And guess what? It worked. The guilt-tripping stopped. The pressure eased. Her mother-in-law stopped insisting that May eat every dish like it was a test. Maybe it wasn't a full breakthrough, but it was something, a shift, a small crack in the power dynamic that had always tilted in one direction. So now I want to hear from you. When you're part of a family that expects you to always bend, what does it take to push back without breaking things completely? Can standing up for yourself be a form of respect? Let's talk about it. Have you ever tried to set a boundary and somehow ended up feeling like you were the one being disrespectful? That's exactly the emotional twist May faced after things finally started to shift. Her mother-in-law stopped pushing food. The awkward guilt-tripping cooled off. On the surface, everything looked calmer. But under that quiet, a whole new kind of tension started to brew. You see, for the first time, May was finally doing what people always tell you to do. Stand up for yourself, speak your truth, hold your ground, and it worked. But it also came with something she wasn't expecting, guilt. Not the kind her mill dished out, but something deeper, more personal. She started asking herself, am I being cold? Did I embarrass her? Is this really worth it if it creates distance in the family? And that's such a common experience, isn't it? Especially in cultures or families where peace is valued more than honesty, where saying no or choosing your needs first can make you feel like a bad daughter-in-law, a bad wife, or even a bad person. The truth is, Boundaries often get misread as rejection, especially when they come after years of silence. And in May's case, she wasn't just standing up to a mother-in-law. She was pushing against a whole system of quiet expectations, unspoken rules, and inherited roles that no one really explained, but everyone still enforced. And here's the part that's hard to say out loud. Sometimes, when you finally take space for yourself, people will pull back. They won't always respond with understanding. Sometimes they'll retreat, or sulk, or quietly rewrite the story, painting you as ungrateful, too modern, too distant. That's what started happening. Her mill didn't argue, didn't fight, but there was a coolness now, less chatting, less enthusiasm. It wasn't hostile, but it was different, like something had quietly shifted, and no one was naming it. So May had to make a choice. Does she go back to playing nice just to restore the old harmony? Or does she keep walking this uncomfortable middle path, one where her voice finally exists, but things aren't quite the same? That's a hard road. And honestly, it's one a lot of people face, especially women in multi-generational or multicultural families. The moment you stop being the peacemaker, you start being seen as the problem. But here's the question I want to leave you with today. Is it possible to keep the peace and keep your sense of self? Or is there always a price? Can families grow through discomfort, or do some just quietly shrink away from it? Let's sit with that. Let me ask you something a little uncomfortable. What if being true to yourself means someone else never sees you the same way again? That's the question May quietly sat with after months of navigating this subtle family war, one made of rice dishes and silences, polite smiles and swallowed feelings. When she finally stood her ground, something shifted, not just in how her mother-in-law treated her, but in how she saw herself. She no longer felt like a guest in her own life. And yet, she also lost something, that illusion of harmony, that false closeness built on performing instead of connecting. You know, a lot of people say, choose your battles, but they don't tell you what happens after the battle is over, when you win the right to be respected, but you feel a little lonelier than before. And that's where May landed. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. Clear about what she's willing to accept. Clear about how far she'll bend. And most importantly, clear that being kind doesn't mean being silent. And over time, things started to settle. Her mite meal didn't become warm overnight, but there were small shifts, a nod here, a less pointed comment there. And even though the relationship stayed formal, it became more honest. There was less pretending, less pressure. It wasn't perfect, but it was realer. Because the truth is, not every story ends with a full circle hug. Sometimes the best you get is quiet respect. And honestly, that's still a win. May learned something powerful. Sometimes, setting a boundary doesn't break a family, it redefines it. And while not everyone will cheer for the new version of you, the people who truly care will adjust, even if slowly. So if you're in a spot like May, feeling stuck between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, you're not alone. It's okay to ask for space. It's okay to want to be heard. And it's okay if that makes things awkward for a while. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to bring you into this. If you've ever had to deal with a family member who guilt-tripped you over food, culture, or anything else, drop a coucher emoji in the comments. Or if you've ever flipped the script like May did, leave her emoji. And if you've got your own story to tell, let's hear it. You never know who it might help. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if this episode hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Because we all deserve relationships that feed both our hearts and our stomachs, with no guilt on the side. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep choosing you.